Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. Thank you very much for joining me once again. You are always most welcome. Well, finally, after talking about it for months and months and months, I have finally completed my Falklands anti-aircraft missiles from Takom, the Takom Sea Dart and Sea Wolf set. So I've been building this since about August of 23 and it's now first week in December. Just finished it literally about an hour ago before shooting this, so I think it's time to celebrate and I deserve a drink. So, not the drink that my wife suggested, she actually provided some, it's actually very nice, but Chardonnay, and I don't know where you are in the world folks, many places obviously, but here in the UK, in the northwest of England, we've had proper snow, the earliest we've had it now for about 12 or 13 years, since 2010. Right at the end, on the 2nd of December, we got a lot of snow coming down in quite a lot of areas actually. Certainly where I live, it was bitterly cold yesterday, and then last night we had snowfall from about 6 p.m, 5-6 p.m. onwards. Not super heavy, but we have had it very heavy in parts of the further northwest in the Lake District, which is an area I used to live in actually, which I like very much. And by the way, I've just remembered I've not got my Christmas lights on because Christmas is almost upon us. I'm just going to put them on. There we go. Got them? No, not got them. Okay. There we go. That's it. There we go. Twinkling lights. Yeah, in the Lake District, places like Ambleside and Windermere, they just got, I think they've got the best part of a foot. A real proper snowfall. And there's pictures on YouTube you can see on the news of people having real problems trying to get through it and not prepared, and I don't think the roads were very well prepared, or the councils and things, so not great. Anyway, so at the point I was getting, the reason I brought that up was my wife has bought this Chardonnay, which is, for me, is a bit of a ladies' drink perhaps, but actually very refreshing on a hot summer's day, but not the thing for today. So I have let her finish the Chardonnay, and I'm going to try some of this wonderful Casa de Colores, and it's the Central Valley of Chile from Marks and Spencer's. Very nice Cabernet Sauvignon, and it's got that rich fruity berry flavours to it that's just what you want on a cold day like today. So I'm going to have a sip of this. So cheers, and early Merry Christmas to you. Let's just hope that the weather doesn't get too much worse. It's starting to look like Canada out there. Not that there's anything wrong with Canada, of course. Some of our great friends and subscribers are from there, but we're not prepared for that here. Just not. Anyway, so let's talk about a funny thing. I've just got to say, I'm just going to straighten the camera. I don't know, it seems the same to you. It looks a little bit lopsided to me. There we go. A bit of an issue. Last week I had yet another commenter. I get lots of new subscribers and I'm very grateful for it. I'm now up to 7.25 thousand, I think it is. 7,250 thereabouts. Pretty much, and very grateful for all the new subscribers. So if you're a new subscriber, thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you'll enjoy more that's coming soon. I think you'll probably find they're going to get even more interesting because we've got some great new reviews coming out, some great new kits in the next, well, between now and Christmas or thereabouts. There's a couple coming through in January and New Year, and I'm going to be building some more interesting, well, I think are more interesting kits anyway. But we do get one or two people that just perhaps don't subscribe and pop onto the channel and just have a look, which is fair enough, you know. But they often just people do make snap judgments, don't you? And they don't look at anything before they comment. I always find this quite amusing. And I've had a repeated comment, keeps coming up, and I've talked about it before, where people say, you never build stuff. One guy said last week, I've unsubscribed because you never build anything. Well, you didn't look back in the channel very far, obviously, because you've only got to look back a couple of months and you'll see that I did videos showing dozens and dozens of builds, okay? Maybe not. Maybe I don't build as many as other people do. I don't care about that really. I'm not here competing with anybody. I'm not interested in that. I just do it for my own pleasure, to share my passion for the hobby, which a lot of you do share. Plus, a lot of people just enjoy watching the reviews, you know, and judging by the feedback of some of the recent kits that I've reviewed, a lot of you just buy them and just put them in the stash, and if there's something really nice, there's a pleasure in that, in just enjoying them and looking at them, you know. We can't all be, you know, Spencer Pollard or, you know, one of these great Francois Villenden type supermodelers, or Martin Kovac, he's the one I was trying to think of, modern one, Night Shift, you know. We can't all be that good, can we? We're not all that good, let's face it. And you know, I'm sorry, but nobody's paying me to build kits. If you want to make me a professional model builder, then that'll be different. Phil Forey used to do that, didn't he? He was a professional, and that's fine. If you want to see, you know, new builds every week, then yeah, you send me some money and I'll do it for you. It's fine. But in the meantime, I shall build at my own pace. Thank you very much, and I suggest that everybody else does the same. If you want to build to you know, model a week, that's fine. Model a year is more my style. Anyway, this year has been, for no particular reason other than delay, it's been the year of the Falklands War. It's not, is it? Obviously, it's a year late for the 40th anniversary, you know. Anyway, as you know, I built the Sea Harrier from Kinetic, and then I was moving on. I had 3 sets I was going to do. One was the Sea Harrier, one was this one, which is actually 2 kits in one, really. So Sea Darts, this is the air defence missiles of the Royal Navy. Sea Dart, which is the sort of medium to long range missile, and Sea Wolf, which is the close-in goalkeeper missile of last resort when they're under immediate attack, as they were from the Skyhawks and Mirages and Daggers, etc. And the other one was the Revell Invincible. I will do that. I will definitely build that one day in the not too distant future, but maybe just not at the moment. I've been through a few builds which I've said before I've not enjoyed. The Sea Harrier from Kinetic was the worst. But there were, and I'm not going to sort of try and repeat that, I'm not going to call this a rant either, I'm not going to put it in the title as a rant or anything like that. I have just produced a montage which I hope you'll see. It's only about, I think, 4 or 5 minutes-ish of photos from the build. I don't do build videos, a lot of you know this. I can't be bothered, it takes too long, it takes way too long to edit them, and you need the skills of editing which I don't have anyway, so there we go. So for me it's much better just to show some snapshots I take as I go through the build. To be honest, you get that, you enjoy seeing what the issues are, you enjoy seeing how it went together fairly well. Even without a commentary you can see that in just 5 minutes. Here I give you the download. This is the after build review of the Takom Sea Dart Sea Wolf. I said it wasn't as bad as the Kinetic Sea Harrier at all, but there were moments where I was reminded of the Kinetic Sea Harrier, and we're going to go through that in a second. But without further ado, let's have a closer look at the actual models, the finished models. As with all kits, you have to know when to stop in, do things like weathering. Somebody popped up a few weeks ago, some of you may have seen this comment on the channel actually, and he popped up after my previous update and said he was on one of the destroyers, and I can't remember which one now, in the Falklands, and he said don't over-weather these missiles because they were not, the Royal Navy do not let them get all rusty. He said yes, when the weather's bad, and there's been a run of bad weather as during the conflict at the beginning, there was a bit of that. But the Royal Navy, by their very nature, they set very high standards, and they have things, they get things repainted, and whether it's aircraft or missile systems, obviously you do see a bit of rust on the hull line of a ship, that's because it's very hard to access, but you won't see, he was saying, you don't see a lot of rust because they would have you repainting them after a month or two if they were starting to look a bit rough. So I have seen some people really weather the hell out of them. I thought they looked brilliant kits, but from what this gentleman told me, that's probably not 100% realistic, in fact. So anyway, I did weather them, but I didn't go crazy. But we'll let you see what you think anyway. So move the box aside. I'll let you have a look at the box first. Zoom you in. Enough chat. I know you like to look at things rather than hear me babble on. So here's the kit. Yeah, there's a couple of curious things about it. I mean, first of all, it depicts here the Sea Dart is in red. And that means basically that is the training rounds, the non-live, no warhead in it. And then here you've got the Sea Wolf. So that right way around, isn't it? Sea Dart, Sea Wolf is this small one. And the Sea Wolf here is in white, and that tells you it's a live round. So I decided, in fact, because I thought the red looked a bit OTT, really, and a bit too much colour. So I decided to go for the live Sea Dart in white, and I went for the blue drill round, which you can see on the side, I'll show you here. On the Sea Wolf, I've actually gone for that as the drill round, which is in the sort of it's like a royal blue, in fact. So there you can see, you've got a choice of white or the blue. White is the live round and blue is the drill round. Yeah, the live round's kind of more exciting in a way, but it just doesn't, I did try and it didn't look that exciting in white, I've got to be honest, being smaller. So I went for the blue. And the other thing that's a bit ironic is you've got, obviously it's like a magazine of 6 launchers. And once you put them in there, if you want to portray it in a realistic way, it's a bit tricky because, to be perfectly frank with you, you'd only ever have one open at once, and it has this clamshell, as you saw there, has a clamshell opening to the launcher tube, front and rear, and you'd only ever have one open at once because obviously it's a blast defence for the other missiles. So you can only have one open at once. So in other words, I ended up painting all these missiles, and of course you don't see them now. They're all tucked away. So trust me, they are in there and they're all blue. But anyway, another one of those moments when you get to the end and think, well, why didn't they tell you this? Now Airfix would have told you that. In fairness, they would have said this won't be visible. You know, they'd have marked it up with, they put it in green, don't they? And they didn't do this. There's nothing to tell you until you get to the end. You realise that actually you're not going to see it. Anyway, digressing. So here's Sea Dart, and this time they're showing it in the white, which is the way I've gone as well. So that's the live round on the ship. Yeah, and there we go. So I thought it was. I thought the kit was pretty decent value. I think it was retailing around the £40 mark when I bought it. £42, I think it was, something like that. Probably cheaper now. What I didn't bargain for with this was the plastic. And other people have talked about this, and I know I've mentioned it once before. That's my first Takom kit, in fact. But I've got to warn you, if you're not used to them, that the plastic is it's really hard. It's quite hard to cut. So I have a range of cutters. I've got everything from the old good old-fashioned Tamiya. I've got Zukimura. I've got two different types of Tamiya here. So you can see this. So I've got the standard what I call the standard Tamiya cutter here. Nippers. These are not. It's not a single-sided nipper. This is just a conventional twin blade nipper. That's that one. Then you've got the one that's designed for also Tamiya, but also this one's designed much finer. It's a finer part. You can see how much thinner it is. Now this is not a one-sided cutter. Again, it is a twin cutter, but it's much finer, so you can get into very small parts easier to cut them. So that's that one. And frankly, of the two, you probably want to go in with this rather brutal basic one because there's a danger with this Takom. I didn't actually break anything, but I was using the display cutters, which are these. Now these are a single. Back in again. These are a single blade. Now these are the ones that cut very cleanly, give you a very smooth finish on the plastic when it's cut. So I don't know if you can make it out there, but one side, as we're looking at it, and my glasses may be failing me here, but I think that the left side is basically a stop, and the right side is the actual cutter, which comes up to cut against that surface, and gives you this very clean cut. But you've got to be careful with these, because when you get to this Takom material, it's polystyrene, but it's more like ABS. It's a really strong polystyrene, like cutting tungsten, to be honest. Really strong stuff. And for goodness sake, under no circumstances should you get out your God hand. I've got one here, which I've not used yet. My brand new God hand. They are not. I would not cut Takom with God hand if I were you, because it's just too hard, and I think you do some damage. And those God hands are not cheap. £50 or more for God hand. So yeah, so anyway, you can see that I've got another one that I use, which I've got to mention, which is the Zukimura one. Actually, let me just show you this. So this is the Zukimura Volt, and this is, again, it's for very fine parts. You can probably tell, hopefully, get zoomed in, that this is a very, very fine one for very thin parts, getting onto tricky parts on your sprue. So that's another nice one. But again, you wouldn't want to use this either on your Takom plastic. So several of you will remember I had my most successful ever modelling video, which was the Holy Grail, which was the 16th scale Takom, Andy's Hobby Headquarters Takom collaboration, the Tiger 1. That is a monster, and I really fear for what that's going to do to my cutters, because it's just a beast. And you've got some big, not excessive, but quite big, necessarily big sprue gate contact points, and you can have some major cutting to do to get that off the sprue, and it makes me a bit nervous. So the issue is, you cut it, and it's very hard, so it's quite resistant to the cutter, and then worse still, trimming it, cleaning it off with the blade, it's quite resistant to that. You have to really go at it and keep trimming it. you can't cut it very easily. It doesn't cut like in one swipe close to the part. I found that very difficult. And then you start having several goes at it, as you have to do. And then, of course, you get out your sanding stick. The good old flory ones here. And it's resistant to that as well. And I found myself working just to get these little nubs off. And one thing that was a bit strange, and you'll maybe seen this in the montage video, a couple of things which were a little bit annoying. Some of these parts they had either the sprue contact point in a very silly place, as we had over on the C dart, which I'll now zoom you in to have a closer look at, because I haven't really introduced them properly and shown you the finished thing. Oh, here we go. So on the C dart, we had, it's not, I mean, I don't think you can really tell now, but maybe if I point it out you will with the 20 times zoom. On this surface, which is the front of it, and they've sort of put the contact point right in the middle of it, you know, in a really silly place, where you've then got to be very careful because it's very visible. You've got to clean it up well, you know, and they made it unnecessarily just not thought through well, you know. Minor thing, but then allied to that, we also had, on these parts, problems where they'd gone for this style that Eduard have started doing, which I don't like, where they have the sprue gate contact point on two different surfaces, not just one. So it goes round a corner and you've got to cut it in both axes. And then you've got two lots of cleanup. Now bear in mind what I said about how difficult the cleanup is on this kit. I'm presuming that they do that a lot. I don't know because I haven't seen too many other Takoms yet, but I'm trying to think back on the tire. If I can remember, I can't actually. But it makes life very difficult because you've got double the cleanup and then you've kind of got quadruple the cleanup because you've got this really hard surface, you've got to really go at it, and then you've got it on two different surfaces, not one. So I found it a bit of a pain really. I'm not having a major moan or a rant about it, but I just want to warn people that Takom have got this super hard plastic, and I know they're coming out with some very interesting kits. They've got this new, is it the Akagi carrier deck from Pearl Harbor, with the island, and I think the pilot's waving off a zero on the deck. Looks great, you know, but again, I think it's going to be more of this plastic. So just be wary, it's going to be a challenge. And if you're used to the likes of Airfix, Revell, Tamiya, etc., you're going to find it very, very different to actually deal with. And you're going to have to go about it in a slightly different way. So I just thought I'd advise people. Anyway, back to the kit. I'm going to go through the instructions in a minute because they are fairly short. And I'm going to point out one or two things that were not great. That stupid things that they could easily avoid, and just started to look a bit kinetic-like, which is why I mentioned it earlier. Not as bad as them. It's not the incomprehensible gibberish that kinetic is. But there's still things that they are basic things they're missing out that the likes of Airfix and certainly Tamiya would never do. So let's have a look in anyway. You'll have already seen in probably look in the background at Seawolf. We'll come to that in a second. So C dart, I've got to say that the parts are a good fit. Basically, everything went together reasonably well. There were no really bad fits. You know, a bit of test fit and it seemed to work quite well really, and it all went on the base nicely. And the detailing and the quality of the plastic is really good. I mean, look at this. It's I did a little bit of weathering. I used some of Phil Flory's products again, and this time I used the dark dirt. I also used the rust because I thought you can definitely see on some of the photographs that there's always a hint of rust before the sailors get told to repaint it, obviously. So we've got, I don't know if it's coming out of the camera how well it's coming out there, but there's just a hint of rust. There's the start of it where it's discolouring, going a bit reddish. So that reddy pinky sort of look before it starts to actually corrode on the surface. So I went for that rather than some super heavy, ultra stained stuff, you know. I think it's come out pretty well, to be honest. I'm fairly happy with it. It's going to look great in the cabinet next to the Sea Harrier, this is. So this is what you'd get, this particular one would be on the front of the HMS Invincible, for example. Invincible had a sea dart right on near the bow. It moves in terms of it's directional, and it will move, he says, be careful, don't break this on camera. Obviously it moves in terms of its angles and things, so we can have it lower if it's aiming at something that's a bit lower on the horizon. And yeah, it's I'm quite impressed with the way it looks at the end. But one of the things I did have trouble with, and this is not really Takom's fault this time, I think it's my fault, I got into a bit of a mess trying to get the white. I couldn't get a good white effect. I couldn't get good coverage. And I can't remember if I primed it, and I've got a horrible feeling I didn't prime it actually. It was probably the root of all the problems. And I normally would do. I could have used a white primer. I've got the Tamiya fine primer. I could have easily done that, you know. But maybe it's the plastic, this hard plastic. It didn't seem to take the paint as well as I expected. So there you go. It's my own fault, probably. So anybody that's going to make a Takom kit, I think you need to prime it. Now I've got away with not priming. You're probably saying, "What, doesn't he know that?" You know. Well, I've got away with not priming Tamiya and Airfix for years, you know. And Revell. I think I primed the Revell F15 and it just sprayed it, you know. Never had a problem really, but some plastics just don't take the paint well. I don't think I primed the ICM Big 25 Fox, but either that took it really well, the paint, but this didn't. And I ended up using LP2 lacquer paint from Tamiya. Didn't go down well at all. Not blaming the paint. Just didn't seem to want to settle. It didn't level the way I thought it would on the surface. Maybe I should have cleaned up. Maybe I should have washed the parts. But I think priming it would probably cure these issues. Anyway, what I did in the end, couldn't get the surface I wanted, so I ended up out of desperation because I wanted a good deep gloss white. And I wanted it, cause it just looked like a very light grey, and I couldn't get the density I wanted at all. So in the end, I went to Revell Rattle Can Acrylic, which on paper, you know, it was the only thing to get my hands on. Actually, I would never normally choose that, but actually, it did a fine job. It did a fine job in the end, and I think it came out really well. So keep an open mind, you know. Just try whatever works, you know. Don't fixate too much in your mind about what's going to be successful and what isn't. So that's Sea Dart, and I say we'll go through it in a minute with the instructions, because there were one or two issues with the instructions being vague and making things less clear than they should be. And Takom are one of these manufacturers who don't put nearly enough, any, written instruction really, apart from the occasional make 2 or make 6. That's about all they ever says. There's nothing in there to help you. And I fell into the trap having thought that lightning could never strike twice after what happened with the Kinetic Sea Harrier, and thinking that, you know, I couldn't get misled by instructions. So unlike the Kinetic, which I knew was terrible, I did not do quite as much research. I did have some research photographs. And when I came to put the fins on, the middle fins are actually on, do I admit this on camera? They're actually on the wrong way around, and I got to the point where I couldn't do anything about it without ruining the kit. I was going to ruin the model if I tried to correct it. I knew I would. Just they anchored very securely, and it was going to be ripping it to pieces. So it's not obvious. If you don't see this video and you just see the montage, you're never going to know. But it was really down to them. I'll explain why in more detail later on. But that was the one thing that really annoyed me, where all they needed to do was give you a side profile, a nice big image of it, which they don't even do here. I mean, that's probably the best they show you. Why they couldn't show them clear and big, and then you'd know exactly how it's to go on, instead of just relying on this strange image, which I will show you in a second, which is a little bit confusing and misleading if you don't have any other reference material, which I didn't at the time. So that was a bit annoying. So I have to say, Takom's instructions, they are weird at times, very weird, and they need to work on them a lot more. They really do, I think. I mean, we had recently reviewed the G version of the Phantom, didn't I? From Meng, and you know, their instructions were really bob on. I was most impressed with that. They really did it well. That's probably the best Chinese instructions I've seen so far, actually, on anything. So it can be done. It can be done, and I think that these manufacturers have got to copy best practice, not worst. Anyway, there we go. So I'll zoom in again. You have another quick look at Sea Dart before I move on to about Sea Wolf, which is quite an animated one. So here we go, Sea Dart. So what actually happens is, as you're looking at it, these are the magazines. These are like a lid which slides over here to the left as you look at it on this side, and to the right on the other side. And the missile comes up from the magazine, and then it basically vertically. I can't really show it now. I don't think we can do it as such. It basically, there we go, vertical with it. And it basically picks up these missiles from the magazine, and it loads them in, and then they're ready to go basically. So yeah, it's quite nice the way they represented that. I think they did it quite well, to be fair to them. And you turn it round, and it's got this whole mechanism, and it looks quite real. Got to say, I'm fairly pleased with it, really, in that respect. I'm just going to tilt those back down again. We don't want to. It's got like a socket fitting here for the actual missiles, and I don't want to have it come out of the socket and drop on the floor. But yeah, it's nice, as you can see. We ended up with quite a slight. It's perhaps not the best location there, the way that they've designed it, but it does the job, and it does look nice. So that's Sea Dart. So that's the Sea Dart, just for the history buffs. Sea Dart in the Falklands, it actually claimed several kills. It claimed, I think, I can't quite remember the numbers, but I know they got at least one Mirage. I think they had a Dagger. I think they killed a couple of Skyhawks, and they killed a Canberra, which was a British Canberra that had been sold to the Argentinians. And I think they also killed a reconnaissance aircraft, shot that down. So they were quite effective, but they did have a habit of going wrong, I'm afraid. Didn't like the cold weather. When it got to minus, below zero, they started playing up. It wasn't the most reliable system, but it had very long range, and it could take 30 miles away, no problem at all. 40,000 feet or something, no problem in taking down fast, high altitude aircraft that were some distance away. And it was effective. It was just it was the first weapon you'd use. You'd use that first. Second, you'd probably use your Sea Harriers, and then as a last resort, you'd use Seawolf. So without further ado, we will move on to Seawolf. And as you probably saw, I have animated this one a bit more than I almost diorama-like, you might say. I'll bring it into the frame. Here we go. So you can see that we've got here, it's launching. Seawolf is blasting off to take on one of the Skyhawks, no doubt, or a Mirage Dagger maybe in San Carlos water. You can see I've got my flames coming out, and that was taken from a photograph. So it's kind of, I'm not sure if you can tell on camera, but it's kind of yellow flame that comes straight out the pipe, and then it turns more to orange, and then it sort of fades away as it blasts backwards. But again, this is quite a nice. This doesn't actually turn though, which I don't know why they didn't make it turn. A bit strange, but it is fixed in that position. But it's nicely done, and it's you get all 6 missiles, so you can have one empty if you want, and have one blasting off. But I was pretty pleased with that actually. I think it's come out really well, and it's the first time I've done any sort of diorama type stuff, even though it's obviously using sort of technique 101 with the cotton wool, but it works quite well, and it looks very much like the photo that I saw. So yeah, it's come out okay. And Seawolf, of course, was perhaps the most critical missile of all, because along with the Rapier, which was the ground land-based system, which was not a very different design to that, actually, just slightly bigger and heavier. And this is the one that they were firing at very close range, to under 3 miles at aircraft that were attacking the task force fleet, places like San Carlos Water and Falklands Sound and Chisel Sound and places like that. Quite an impressive thing. So it's obviously a magazine of 6 missiles, and it travels at incredible speed. I think it travels at Mach 3. It's a really fast missile. And if one of those is coming at you, you're in real trouble, quite frankly. It's small, it's incredibly manoeuvrable. It hasn't got a massive warhead, but it doesn't need one. I mean, these would literally go up the exhaust pipe right inside the engine and detonate in the back of the engine. And there's lots of footage on YouTube of them doing just that, of course, on Skyhawks, for example, and Mirages over in San Carlos Water. Anyway, so there we go. So there you go. You can see I finally got there after seem to have been talking about it. Every time I've been doing a YouTube review or a video, people like Gary and Stuart and Paul and David and all the crowd. I'm not missing anybody out intentionally, but people keep saying, "Oh, what are you building now? What are you building now?" And I keep saying, "I'm doing Seawolf." Oh, you're still doing that? Oh, right. And I feel like, oh, this is painful. You've got to get on with it. But I did get into a bit of a rut with it, really. First of all, I had this problem with the white, and that sort of gave me a mental block for a week or two. And then I couldn't decide about the colours on whether to go with the white or go with the... I certainly didn't want them both white, but I didn't want the red version, so I think I ended up with the right choice, for me anyway. But yeah, there was one or two things where parts didn't quite match as you might expect. And especially on the Seawolf, actually. Another thing that was very strange, and I'll show you in the instructions in more detail, but you can actually see in the montage that they come up with these photo etch parts, and there's no photo etch parts whatsoever on Sea Dart at all. And then there's tons of it on Seawolf, which is almost like an afterthought. It's like, oh, we've got to put the photo etch on Sea Dart, so we'll put it all on Seawolf. But it was so badly conceived, and I'll show you in a second why, where there's basically no locating point for it to go in at all, and you end up with a piece of photo etch, like a blade, that's just got to attach to a missile. It's got nothing, no groove in it, no place to put it, and there's several of these, so it's not that you can't just blag it and get away with it, because they've got to be the same on every one, and there's 6 of them, and there's a lot of repetition. It was a little bit like building tracks at times, I thought. So it wasn't easy, not an easy kit to build actually, certainly not for beginners, I wouldn't say, no. And this photo etch was the thing that probably let it down the most. So of course, I think I gave it 9 or 9.5 out of 10 when I did the review back in 2 years ago, I think, 18 months ago. It won't survive that, I'm afraid. It'll be much lower, but they almost always are, of course. Any after-build review reveals issues with even the best kits, like Tamiya's Spitfire Mark 9 32nd scale. Even that had 1 or 2 issues that I found. It couldn't quite meet its 9.5 out of 10. And that's often the case. So we shouldn't take it as too much of a negative. It depends how far down the scale it drops. What did I say with the kinetic? Was it 4 out of 10? I think I gave it in the end, which was not. That was my overall impression having built it. That was not a good score at all. Anyway, I will move my Seawolf, launching to take on the Skyhawks, and let's have a look at these instructions, and I can explain in more detail where some of the issues were really. So it shows a kind of a diagram here. If it only shows a clear diagram like that within, it wouldn't have been so bad, perhaps a bigger one. And it gives you a write-up about the history, which we won't repeat, but then it's got the sort of sprue map which you normally expect. And this is one of the things I don't like about Takom. There's no descriptive information here at all. Mainly the week on that Phantom said you are building the elevators or elevons, or these are the flaps, flap construction. Nothing here, no words of any sort, nothing. Just a diagram. Now, in fairness, these early stages are not very problematic. They went together fairly smoothly. I thought the parts were pretty well done. Not sure about the wisdom of this with these like collars. That could have all just been moulded in as one piece. But, okay, you're adding some detail, but that was probably the only bit that didn't fit perfectly, to be honest, but it just needed a bit of manipulation and work on it. Now we start to get into the trouble when we get into these more detailed parts of the missiles. So, we've got the support arms, actually the launch support arms here. And this is where, as I mentioned, doesn't really show it here, but they had a sprue contact gate point that was right in the middle of the face, which was very obvious. If you didn't clean it up well, it would be very noticeable. So that was a little bit irritating. And then we get into the big problems here. So what have we got? This is the Sea Dart missile itself, and there's some very poor diagrams here in terms of directing you in terms of which way around to put the fins. Now some are obvious, like here, very obvious. These are not so obvious, especially this one, this middle one. And it shows it heavily angled back. Now it has got 2 angles. One of the angles is almost flat on, the other one is at 45 degrees or thereabouts. So I put it, based on this diagram, and it just repeats the diagram for no apparent reason. Why would you repeat it? I don't know. Instead of just saying make 2, which is what it says already, and then it sort of tells you, it doesn't explain why it's showing it again. So this is where it's going a bit wrong. And this diagram is most unhelpful, and frankly it's inaccurate. And it's only later when I actually glued them together and I started looking at a reference photo and I realised it seemed much flatter on the flatter side. You can see it there. It kind of looks a little bit different in the way it's represented. Why they couldn't just show you a side-on view, which is what Zokimura or Tamiya would do, even Airfix would do it, frankly, makes it very, very easy to get it wrong, and I did, I'm afraid. So it was a mistake, but I didn't feel it was a mistake that I thought about. I wonder how many people would make the same mistake. Probably most, unless you were looking at the reference photo, which is what I should have done and not trusted them. So that was a bit frustrating. And then we get some parts that, yeah, they don't go together too badly, in fairness here. These are all fairly straightforward. That was okay. And then, and this is again one of my big beefs with these guys, especially Takom, being one of the, in the same crew, in my mind, as Border, another manufacturer who can't be bothered to tell you any proper information. And you put that in, and then it doesn't tell you, but you immediately start building a complete another missile system. It doesn't say Seawolf here to tell you you've started something else. It just sort of starts telling you to glue parts together. So you do, and then we get into the trouble. Then we start getting a whole host of these silly little bits of PE, many of which have got no locating hole. It gives the impression it must have a locating. No, it doesn't. It doesn't go into anything. You've just got to make it sit. A flat edge has got to go against a flat piece of plastic, which even with the best CA glue in the world is going to give you a whole load of issues. And then over the page we've got the same again. This is the worst part of all, actually, in terms of the practicality, and this is where beginners just forget this kit. So it's telling you to put these flat plates, which are actually like a hoisting plate. They actually have a hole in them so they can hoist with a chain and take these missiles and load them onto the ship's deck before they go into the magazine. But nothing's explained, there's no words. And what you actually have to do is you have to cut out the PE. You've got to file it down so it's smooth on the edge where you've cut it. And then you've just got to, and it shows it as though there is a slot. I don't know if you can make that out by going a bit closer. It gives the impression there's a slot. There is no slot whatsoever. There is nothing to anchor that PE into. So you end up using skill and trickery and either try and create a slot yourself, which is very, very hard to do because you've got to replicate this so many times. You're not going to manage that really, not with accuracy and replication. Or you just glue it on with a very powerful super glue, edge on, which I managed to do. And then, of course, within a few days, they just fall off because they've got no anchorage, they've got no bite. It's just bad design, this. And it's there again. And they don't go anywhere, they just go edge on to basically a round tube. Just a nonsense, really. I mean, really stupid. I'm sorry, that's kinetic stupidity, levels of stupidity, isn't it? And then we get, you know, you're replicating, and again, they don't make it overly clear here about how you go about putting some of these parts on. There's a lot of replication, and yet you've got to be careful which parts go where. And look at the lack of clarity here. Look at this. Here's a classic example of it. It just sort of points in the general direction, and you've got two completely different designs. Very easy to get confused. I didn't, but I looked at it. I thought I could imagine people getting mixed up here because it doesn't explain anything. You know, if that was Airfix or Tamiya, there'd be or certainly Zokimura, there'd be like a separate diagram explaining what it would look like before, what it would look like after a side view. No, nothing to help you at all. Nothing to help you. You know, and I started to use that K word and grumbling and muttering under my breath with it. And it went on and on like that. And then at the very end, we actually had some parts which didn't go together particularly well, actually, and weren't very well conceived in the very last build stage. And this was all a bit silly, the way they designed it. It wasn't not designed by a modeller, and you need to be very patient You've got to make sure you get the alignment to get this there's no jig to help you, which again, other manufacturers like Airfix or Tamiya would provide you with. They put it in a jig. We've seen that in other kits. Just not very well thought through, and you know, this thing I've complained about in the past. You know, not designed by a modeller. Nowhere is there a big, decent diagram, a side view, or a plan view of the missiles. You know, everything's tiny, isn't it? Everything's tiny. Look how small they've made it all. It's not easy to follow, especially if you're hard of eyesight, like some of the older members of us are, of the modelling community. But, you know, everything's tiny. It's like they're trying to race to see how small they can print everything. Look at the poor relief here, the poor contrast as well. Quite hard to follow, isn't it? I mean, look at the writing here. It's ridiculous. Why? Why have they made it so poor as that? Now, the plastic was very good. You know, it wasn't like Kinetic where they were, you know, they really got everything wrong, almost. This was much better than that, but it fell short of expectations. It really did. And in some areas, it's very, very good, and the moulding is lovely. So, in terms of marks out of 10, as an after build review, I'm going to give it a 7. Which I think is reasonable. It was good, very good in some areas, but it was very stupid in some other areas, and it almost sets you up to fail a little bit because they just couldn't be bothered to go that extra mile. A little bit more description, slightly better instructions, with better diagrams, and there'd be no issue, to be honest. The parts I complained about, I would overlook and only knock it a point off because most of them are okay. But it's just the misdirection and the lack of clarity about how you're supposed to be doing things, and that photo etch thing, the whole photo etch in that kit is like an afterthought that hasn't really been thought through properly. Quite a mess, to be honest. I wasn't impressed with the photo etch element of it at all. It just seemed like it didn't really need to be there. Anyway, I'm going to zoom in again. Have another last quick look at this. And let's turn our missiles around. There we go. Bit more zoom, yes. Bit more zoom, there we go. So there you have it. So that's Sea Dart and Sea Wolf, which I thought, overall, yes, I definitely recommend the kit if you're interested in the Falklands War. I think it's a really nice complement to have to go with the likes of your Sea Harriers, etc., or your Mirages or Pucaras, because I know one of my friends from the channel, David, he recently, when he was at Telford, I was with him, and he got the Kinetic Pucara, and he was trying so hard to get me to buy this Pucara, and it was quite a good price. And this is the one that was captured and then was used by BAE Systems and had RAF colours put on it. And I was very, very tempted because everybody says the Pucara is probably one of their better products. Should I have got it? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe, I'm sure that they'll be going fairly cheap soon somewhere. But I resisted. But I just didn't want another of those experiences. Anyway, with that in mind, so there we go. So that's the Takom Sea Dart and Sea Wolf. I hope you found it interesting. If you're thinking about building one, at least now you'll be forewarned. Forewarned is forearmed, of course. But I wouldn't want to put anybody off it. I think once I put that now in my cabinet, it's going to look really nice with the Sea Harrier in front and those behind, you know. But it did disappoint me a little bit, just a little bit. And I want to have some kits that I'm going to enjoy building. So what's next? Well, I think you know what's coming, because you've probably seen it in front of me on the desk. So I have moaned about Edouard. I'll take that away now. Go to the bin day tomorrow. I moaned about Edouard. I did just have another drink, I think. Just have a cigar as well. Oh no, later. Can't smoke that on camera. I don't know about you, but I do get a really satisfying feeling when I finish a kit, if I'm fairly pleased with it. You can always do them better, you can always do more. Look, does it look like you hoped it would look? And if the answer is yes, you have done enough. And I must admit, I do like the way that by animating the Sea Wolf, I think that's really worked well. So that is done. That's going to go straight in the cabinet as soon as I finish making this video for safety reasons. I will of course be excuse me, Very soon I'll be doing my annual cabinet cleaning because it's December. Oh. I hate it, I really do. I know I made a video YouTube content out of it, but it's not something I enjoy. I've got too many, especially in the cabinet we have in our hall, which is where it's got a lot of small figures, and trying to set them up again. It's so much time to try and put everything back together, and then you've got to take them out, you've got to dust them, you've got to clean the cabinet, dust the cabinet, wipe it all down, you know, not leaving any residues or dust if you can. And it goes on, this job, and it's basically a whole day's work. Anyway, moving on. It's that time of the year. Now, I did complain about Edward, as I mentioned. I said to you I was going to have a go at their kits because somebody said, do you ever build any Edward kits? You're not built that many. You know, people will throw up criticisms to try and dismiss what you are saying, however valid it is. And of course I have built several Edward kits, but just not as many as I'd like, perhaps. I'm going to build this one. Pearl Harbor anniversary is next week, or later this week in fact. 7th of December. So yeah, I think it's time this was built. Now of course I complained about the decals, and I used these decals on camera. Tried to use them without any success. Not great success anyway. Certainly not an acceptable standard. So I've ordered some new replacement ones so I can bin these. Replacements from Tech Mod in Poland, and they're on their way as we speak. So probably not long after you watch this video, those will be delivered by the postman. And I'll get cracking with this. So the plan is, the build schedule is, to build this Pearl Harbor. I haven't decided which carrier or which version yet. I've not got that far, but those can certainly go in the bin because I won't be using them. You know, the stencils. Why? I mean, the stencils. There's a lot of them, and they're just almost beyond ridiculous to try and even think about using those. So they won't get used. I mean, I'm just going to chuck them in the bin. Well, I might just keep them as an experiment, just in my stash of decals. But that's going to get built because it's Pearl Harbor anniversary. I would like to build the Tamiya F14, which is going to be a really enjoyable build, I know it is. And then early in the new year I'm going to be building, the plan is anyway, I always say I'm going to be building because sometimes it doesn't happen, but the plan is I'm going to do the Mosquito, the 32nd scale from Tamiya. Long overdue now. It'll be 9 years after Christmas that I've had that kit, and it wants building. It's screaming at me to build it, and I think I can get it in the cabinet. I hope I don't turn out to be wrong. I'll probably do some last minute emergency measurements just to check, but I think I'll be alright. So that will take me probably straight through to next summer, and maybe beyond, I don't know. But it's the anniversary in February, of course, of the Amiens raid, which that particular aircraft is from. Charles Percy Pickard and Alan Broadley were both killed in that raid, leading it, and it was a successful raid, so I thought it was quite a nice tribute to them to do that. So yeah, 18th of Feb 44 I think it was, so it's 80 years, isn't it? So that's the plan. Whether it all happens that way, I don't know, but I will certainly be starting this zero in the next 3 to 4 days max. This week basically I'll be cracking on, put Seawolf away and just forget about that one now, and move on really. So that's where we're at. So anyway, I hope you found it interesting. I hope you did have a chance to look at the montage of photographs from the build for Seawolf and Sea Dart. I'll put a link in over here. I'll give you a link to it. Probably also the Falklands War Takom I did. Probably put a link for that over here, and you can enjoy those hopefully as well. And in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Please stay tuned. Don't forget to give us a like. Give me a 10 out of 10, even though this only managed 7 in the end. Give us a like. Give us 10 out of 10. You will be you want to stay tuned because I've got some amazing new kits from ICM who've once again pulled it out of the bag with a load of new stuff right at the end of the year. You'll find those very interesting, and I've got 2 or 3 big releases to come around Christmas time as well. Plus we're going to do more talks about, let's talk about Tamiya, and let's talk about quite a few other manufacturers. So stay tuned, and we will be back to entertain you, I hope, very soon. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves, stay warm whatever you do, and take care on the ice and the snow. unless you're in Australia, in which case enjoy the sunshine. Thanks very much, take care, till next time, cheers and bye for now.